Okay, so this is going to be more of a typical long-form video looking at the patch 11.12 patch notes from League of Legends, obviously. For those of you who are used to the more meme and fast-paced videos, this is going to be this is going to be an unedited long-form video looking at the patch notes, typically going with the more traditional video where I look at u.gg, I look at the wiki, stuff like that. I'm not trying to be dismissive to the people who like the faster paced videos. I'm just saying that I'm trying to juggle two types of videos that people enjoy. So I'm just informing you right now. For those of you subscribed to my Patreon, that helps me with this out since I'm less worried about trying to make sure each video gets the most views, but rather I can kind of, I can have people guaranteed and being subscribed to my Patreon, which means that I'm more free to experiment with this stuff, and I'm also free to put out the less popular long form type stuff. So thank you for those who subscribe to my Patreon. Thanks to you who like and subscribe and leave comments down below and all that. Thank you, everybody. Let's go through it. So this patch is particularly bad. I've done a few takes on this, and I think the best way to go about it is to say, wow, I do not like this patch overall. Now, I do like the Mundo update. I'm going to do a video on that tomorrow, and the reason I'm going to do that is because I actually play Mundo and I play top lane, so I'll be free to actually experiment with it myself and put out a video on it myself instead of speculating and then relying later on, you know, wiki stats and stuff like that. Like, I don't need to go over this right now because I can just put a video on this later. For Philios. On my first take, I tried to describe all this, and I realized that it's pointless. None of you guys know what Aphelios does overall, okay? None of you. So let me go through here and explain what's going on here. They are being extraordinarily stupid and buffing one of the most problematic aspects of his kit. Now, to keep this into perspective, this would be like if Kassadin was underpowered, so they decided to decrease the cooldown on his ultimate to balance him. This is insanely stupid to buff his turret. Insanely stupid. The rest of this, these are all just slight adjustments. I mean, I could go into it, but he'll heal less on auto attacks. He'll heal more on abilities. It attacks less, but more damage on his Q. The little pistol, you know, whip, like, ability. Magic resist goes up, AD per level goes up. I mean, this is all... None of you guys know what Aphelios does. It's just pointless to talk about. I'm wasting time. Draven is getting a little bit more damage on his spinning axes. Not really sure why. I'm honestly, I don't know why. I don't think he was underpowered, was he? I should have shaved before this. Look at that. Look at that. I'm like scrampy here. Is that a word? Scrampy? Anyway, so Draven's getting more damage on his spinning axes. I don't think he was really that underpowered. He seemed decently popular. If I look here, Draven he was still in the top 10 for bot lane. He wasn't doing terrible. Sometimes Riot seems to really enjoy champions being top tier at all times. I think Draven was a firm mid tier, and I don't think AD carries really overall needed to have, you know, this sort of power creep leapfrog. Gnar's damage is going down. Now, I haven't really had an issue with Gnar for a while. His pick rate has fallen really hard. This seems like they're nerfing him after he stopped being a problem. I think, personal opinion, this kills the champion. I think Gnar is dead after this. I don't hate Gnar dying, but I hate the idea that Riot let him be so overpowered for so long, and then finally when he's dead, they go back and they go, we should deal with that problem. I think this is dumb. This didn't need to happen. This didn't need to happen. This is dumb. This is dumb. This is also dumb. Can I like have a dumb tracker 3 for 3? Hecarim, not dumb, but I did actually take one issue with it, and let me explain here. They say right here, where they're reverting part of his 11.9 nerf. Now, that is technically correct. They are reverting part of his nerf, but the thing is that if you look here, they decreased his base armor, but then they increased his armor per level. That means overall that now that they're increasing his base armor again, his level 18 armor is higher, I think by 4. I think it's 4 higher than it's ever been. Now, that's not a big deal. 4 more armor at level 18 isn't some huge nerf, but it's a little bit disingenuous because it was a side grade. They reduced his armor at the early levels and buffed it at the later. So they're also increasing the AD ratio on his Q. This is basically what I was talking about when they first nerfed him. They wanted to push him into an AD build. They wanted to push him away from a tank build. I think that AD Hecarim is starting to sort of, maybe not. I mean, oh, hecka, buddy. You aren't doing great. No, he's not really doing good at all. He's doing far worse than I thought he was. I don't think he's that unplayable, though. I think people maybe just aren't adjusting to his new builds as much. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's even mid-tier. I think he's low tier, low mid-tier. I don't think he's unplayable, though. And I don't know. I mean, these are pretty much fair. As I was saying, you know, they're trying to push his AD build, and yeah, this is one way to push his AD build. I actually like this because for like 10 years, I've always been thinking to myself, it would be really nice if Hecarim's Q scaled better. For 10 years, I've thought that because it was always weird to me that his Q had good base damage, but the scaling was always so bad. I think the combination of his bonus damage from rampaging having an AD ratio and the ability itself having a good AD ratio, that means if a Hecarim starts rampaging, if they've built 3 AD items and they go Conqueror, he will start doing some pretty good damage and hurting people. Yeah. I think maybe they should have buffed the AD ratio on his Rampage. Maybe that's where I would have gone. Instead of buffing the AD ratio on the Q itself, maybe buff the Rampage. So that actually starting to Rampage and, you know, but whatever. I mean, this is good. That's good. Illaoi, I want to specify for this is not her level 1 mana. This is her mana growth. So it's barely affects the laning phase. This is more for a mid to late game. Yeah, I mean, she often runs low on mana in later phases of the game. You know, I know a champion who that happens to too. It's Jax. It's Jax. It's happening to Jax. Nothing really to say here. If they're gonna buff Illaoi, this is probably the most fair way to buff her in a way that doesn't impact the laning phase and doesn't impact her ability to ult and Q, or sorry, ult and W spam you. For Jarvan, now I actually want to talk about Jarvan here real quick because when they nerfed Jarvan 2 years ago, I need to stop doing that. When they nerfed Jarvan 2 years ago, they slashed the bonus shield from 2 to 3% of his max health to 1.5% flat. Now, I think reducing the cooldown is fair-ish, but I think I would have liked it if they pushed the HP ratio back. If we consider that hitting 3 people in a team fight is about average for a tanky frontliner, then, you know, 2 to 3 is about average, I would say, then the dude's only getting a 4.5% health shield. That is monstrously low, especially with the fact that Serpent's Fang is in the game. I don't think Jarvan is doing terrible. In fact, let me look this up. He's not. He's like a high low tier right now. I mean, what are his best items even? Gore Drinker, fair enough. I think I would have liked it if they increased the HP ratio. I think the cooldown reduction is fine, but the fact that he gets such a low ratio on the shield and he needs to hit multiple people with it, I think I would have liked it if they pushed it a tiny bit. Just like if they just hit him like a tiny bit, like just pushed him a little bit harder, maybe made it, instead of 1.5%, make it 1.5 to like 2.5%. Maybe make it like 12 cooldown, 12 to 9, 1.5 to 2.5, so you actually have to max it. Something like that. That would also push Tank Jarvan, which, as we saw in the items, was clearly underperforming. So I don't think this is going to do that much because he's going to jump in. It'll be the same shield. He'll die. It'll be off cooldown when he's dead. I think it'll help his win rate. It'll probably push him from a low. It'll probably push him from like a high low tier to a low mid tier. You know, from like a D tier to a C tier. But overall, this isn't going to push the champion in a way that would make him viable. I think if they wanted to push him, what they should do is maybe increase his armor and MR, so that he can go with a damage build better. Like, if we look at the N, maybe push his MR to like 2.0, push his armor to 4. so that he gets more armor and MR per level, so that when he builds those big bruiser items like Sterak, Scoredrinker, etc., that he gets a little bit more armor and MR to use them with. I think that would have been a good way too. Maybe do that in combination with the W change, because I think he'll obviously need a little bit more. I think Jarvan is balanced in a pretty good area around a B tier, because otherwise he tends to be a safe pick for competitive play, which, oh, Kai'Sa. Something not a lot of people factor in, and especially AD carry players, but they don't really consider, is that when a champion is a super high pick rate, and as we can see here, Kai'Sa tends to be super high pick rate. Ezreal's bonkers broken, by the way. Ezreal's balanced at a 47 to 48 win rate. The fact that he's currently the highest pick rate and a 50% win rate, he's bonkers broken right now. If you know how to play Ezreal, you basically auto-win. Anyway, the fact that Kai'Sa is such a massive pick rate, I mean, look at this gulf of pick rate. Like, look at these two, and then, like, look below. That's incredible. She shouldn't have that high of a pick rate. I think she's a little bit too safe right now. And I think that's what they're going for. They're nerfing her early game. I've always thought that Kai'Sa had a weird balance where she is a little bit weaker in the early levels, power spikes really hard in the mid game, and then kind of falls off a little bit in the late game. Now, no one gets... I want to specify, because everyone always yells at me, Vince. No one gets weaker in the late game, okay? The weakest champions at scaling, who are the weakest scaling champions, they even get a little bit weaker into the late game. Or sorry, I said that wrong. Even the worst champions at scaling still get stronger into the late game. It's just in comparison to other champions, they get weaker, correct? Kai'Sa, in comparison to actual late game champions, gets a little bit weaker in the late game. I think we can see that when you compare to actual scaling AD carries, you know, the monsters of the late game, Jinx, Vayne, Twitch, that Kai'Sa will fall off a little bit, okay? So, okay, I should clarify. So she's getting a little bit of a nerf in her early game. I don't really know what they're doing. Realistically, if they wanted to power her down, I think they should look at her mid game a little bit, like take a little bit of power away from there somehow. Maybe make her passive. I don't know. I'm not even gonna comment. Malphite, dumb. I looked at this. Okay, so I'm not even gonna show the stats. I'm sure you all know this. He's an average champion. He's mid tier. They're trying to push him to high mid tier again. He's the best example of a champion designed for auto-filled players. And I do not, and I will never understand why Riot pushes a champion who is very clearly an auto-filled pick. Why are we pushing a champion? Probably one of the lowest skill champions in the entire game. Why are we pushing this champion so autofill players can lane with him better? Autofill players shouldn't be winning lane. Should you be going with the safe pick? Yes, but you shouldn't be winning. It's stupid. Rammus. Okay, so I actually had Rammus up here. So they nerfed Rammus's health per level from 95 to 80, which gives Rammus one of the lowest healths in the game. I think this is probably the lowest health for any tank other than Sion, which I think you might know why Sion is low base health, which means he doesn't actually have low base health. Rammus, on the other hand, there is an issue here, I feel, with this champion of this low base health. Revert the health nerf. Don't buff his base armor. This just pushes him even harder into being a niche anti-physical. Like, why is being an anti-physical a role? Especially when physical champions have some of the best anti-tank options in the game. AD carries have Lord Dominic's Regards, which just reads tanks be gone at 2 items. A tank who counters AD carries doesn't really have a role, because by mid-game they're useless. His ult probably had too long of a cooldown. So I'm just going to do this. This is a dumb change. This is a dumb change. I'm okay on this. It's not a dumb change. I'll give him that. It's an okay change. Okay change. Dumb change. Dumb change. Dumb change. So I think half of them have been dumb. Here we go. Super dumb. Okay, read this. If he's overpowered because of Divine Sunderer, then why are we nerfing his early game? Why not nerf his mid game? Why not make it 12 to 20% instead of 10 to 22%? Why are we making him even more of a feast or famine champion who can lane against some champions and for free scale up because they can't harass him enough? And against other champions that he can't lane against, now he really can't lane against them. This is a dumb change. Nerf his mid game, not his early game. Dumb change. Especially because nerfing his early game particularly affects the high ranks and not the low ranks. So if you're and this is clearly aimed at the lower ranks. I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. I'm not sitting here like, oh no, NASA's at high rank, okay? Yeah, so I would have made it, if it's going from 12 to 24 to 10 to 22, at the very least, make it 12 to 22, but in my opinion, make it like 12 to 20. And here's what they could do. If they would make it 12 to 20, what they could then do is double down on that, and they could make it, the wither range could maybe go up with ranks, so that, you know, in the super late game when he starts to fall off, he gets more range on wither, so he can hit the AD carry a little bit easier with wither. I think that would smooth over things. So like make it 12 to 20 and then give Wither a little bit more range with each rank so that he scales a bit better against AD. That would be a much smarter change. So this is dumb. This is super dumb. I'm not even going to comment on the change. They're nerfing his healing against minions, okay? With his Q. Renekton's healing against minions. Let me specify this, okay? They're nerfing him because of pro play. If you push a counter pick environment where a champion must be a safe pick to be picked, you can then not start nerfing the safe picks because they're the only safe picks you can pick. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. Okay? So, not sure what to say about this other than it's dumb. So, talent is pretty overpowered, and I was looking at these changes and I was trying to justify them in my head, and I kind of can't. So the damage on his initial rake is going down. The damage on his return is going up. Overall, if you get hit by both, it sees a tiny little bit of damage increase. They're trying to push it so you have to actually get hit by the return damage. But the thing is, rake, Q, ult, auto already procs his passive. And with how much damage creep has been in the game, I don't think this is going to nerf his damage enough to where he won't get the kill. Even though it's a decent nerf on the initial damage, it's not that huge. And I think talent is pretty overpowered right now. It's a decent change, I guess. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's not a bad change. I just don't think it goes far enough. Talon's pretty overpowered. And now let's just be clear, okay? Serpent's Fang needs to be nerfed. Serpent's Fang is causing... Prowlers and Serpent's Fang are 90% of the issue with AD champions right now, and it's why all of them are overpowered, okay? I just want to specify that. That's what's going on here. These champions, without being buffed, and even multiple times being nerfed, they didn't suddenly become overpowered. It's Serpent's Fang, it's Manamune, it's Prowlers. This is kind of like the Gnar change. It feels like he's already bad, and now they're killing him. I don't think Gnar... I mean, if I'm looking at jungle... Yeah, Udyr's pick rate and win rate is down. And much like Gnar... Yeah, they're both at the 10th pick, low win rate. They're already being pushed out of the meta, and now they're going down, and they're like, let's nerf them. I think at the very least, what they could have done is boosted the cone AP ratio to 0.9. At 0.8, you need 350 ability power to equal that out. At 0.9, I mean, maybe they should... I think they should buff his AP ratios so that Udyr can go with more of an AP build. Maybe he could slot in a Demonic Embrace. Maybe buff this to 0.9, buff the AP ratio on Turtle, add like a 0.4 AP ratio to his Q, something like that. That would also make his builds make more sense. Alternatively, add an AD ratio to his Phoenix stance, an AD ratio to his shield. Don't throw Riven at me. I mean, like a small one, like a 0.41 to his shield, right? Not the 1.0 plus another 20% because of her ultimate that Riven has, okay? But I think he should be unified. He should either have AP or AD. Or alternatively, he should have enough AP or AD ratios to actually make one of those stats worth building, right? Varus, so his lethality builds are overpowered. Now, I want to show you guys this because this is yet another stupid change. His AP, sorry, his lethality ratios are overpowered. So what are they nerfing? His magic damage. His lethality ratios are overpowered. So they're nerfing his magic damage. I don't have anything else to say. I'm going to throw out an actual suggestion here. Give his Q a slight attack speed into AD ratio. For example, 20% attack speed becomes 10 damage on his Q. Okay? 50% attack speed becomes 25 damage on his Q. Then you make that increase, so 50% more. So if I build, for example, a 50% attack speed item, that becomes 25 damage, then that becomes 37.5 damage on a full charge. Alternatively, make it charge faster with attack speed. Don't nerf his magic damage because lethality is overpowered. Nerf the damage, the physical damage that enables lethality builds to excel. Then give him a reason to actually go with an AD carry build. Now, you could say, attack speed isn't an AD carry build. Okay, fine. I'll actually agree with that. Then give it a crit ratio. Okay, give it a crit ratio. Make his Q convert crit into damage. Something like that. For every 20% crit, it gets 10 damage. Something like that. Like, you can do this, okay? We've had champions like Jhin who do stuff like this. Make it, get the Infinity Edge gives it even more, okay? I mean, if I build, for example, a Collector, maybe that gives me lethality and damage, and then the crit on my Q becomes even more bonus damage. Don't make his Q able to crit, just make crit as a stat, because everything is a stat. When I build damage, I do more damage on my auto attacks, right? If I build crit, just make 20% crit, have a little, like, ratio on the ability, right? 20%, you have 20 crit, oh, then your ability does 10 more damage, something like that, okay? We've seen that on abilities like Viego. That's a good example, Viego. I think that would be a good way to push AD carry itemization on him finally without doing this what did I say when they buffed him? I said we'd be back here doing this stupid song and dance of nerfing lethality because they aren't smart enough to finally give him ratios for the items you want him to build. If you want him to build crit items, but you want his Q to be his main source of damage, you need to ensure that his Q remains a prominent source of damage even as you build crit or attack speed, okay? If you want to ensure that on hit doesn't become an issue, then give it a crit ratio. Give this a crit ratio. Make it so the damage on hit has a crit ratio. Do something. Don't do nothing. They're literally, it's so frustrating because they sit here doing nothing and then and then what? You did nothing and then you nerfed it again because you did nothing. How frustrating is that? You know, how frustrating is that for me? Okay, I'm the person who has to sit here and watch this and imagine from my perspective, right? That they've done this like 5 times now and now they're doing it the 6th time and I'm just like, wow, it's happening again. I'm like, I don't even know. I'm like Sarah Connor in the mental hospital, just sitting here Varus is getting buffed, and I'm like, they're just gonna nerf him because of lethality. You're dead. You're dead. You're all dead. You're gonna get nerfed because of lethality. And then they do it again, and I'm like, yeah. Okay, Wukong, I also think this is dumb. Because Divine Sunderer is overpowered, we're nerfing his attack damage growth and his QAD ratio. Now, let me explain this. The reason that Divine Sunderer on Wukong is so strong is his Q armor shred. Okay? Nerfing his attack damage growth puts him off Trinity, because that is how Trinity gets damage. Nerfing his bonus AD ratio puts him off things like Gore Drinker and Stride Breaker. What they should have done is nerfed his Q armor shred. Nerf his Q armor shred, right now it's 10 to 30. Nerf it to like 10 to 20. He could still go Black Cleaver. He could still go Trinity, Gore Drinker, etc. But that would directly hurt him with Divine Sunderer. It would hurt him with every build, but it wouldn't. The problem with these nerfs is these disproportionately hit the not Divine Sunderer while not directly hurting the Divine Sunderer. Now, Divine Sunderer does give champions like Wukong, who's extraordinarily overpowered, it does give champions like Wukong a way to sustain throughout fights. But we've seen here, Divine Sunderer is an 87% pick rate, Trinity's down to a 6%, Gore Drinker's down to a 3%. These items don't need to be hurt, and this item doesn't need to be not hurt. I do agree that Bruiser's getting a way to sustain through fights is good. I have complained that them losing all their ways to sustain through fights is a bad idea. I think they clearly do need the ability to stay alive or they become useless, okay? There's so much unconditional damage, things like Scorch, things like Leandries, all these ways that you can take damage in a fight that even if you take minimal damage, you slowly get peeled away. So you do need a way to heal up to keep through that. So I do think Divine Sunderer is good. I do think that Trinity, and because there's no healing to back up Trinity, I do think that Trinity is a bad idea. But I don't think the way to go about it is to just only push Divine Sunderer. Ziggs is gaining more base damage on the later ranks of his Q, and his ult is going to be faster. Not much to say here. He's one of the more popular low-tier picks, which is kind of confusing to say. But I think much like how the Xerath changed kind of made him popular for a tiny bit, and then people went meh. I think the Ziggs change is going to do the same thing. At the end of the day, people die so instantly, and there's so many ways to heal out of combat, and I'm not trying to make a social critique on the game. I'm not saying, let's nerf healing. Oh my god, the Sterix gives you too much sustain against... I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that clearly, these sorts of builds, unless they're very overpowered, these sorts of champions aren't really going to come back. If you want to buff these sorts of champions, I think you should start with the poke item. The item deliberately made for poking, because there is a poke mage item. And I think you should push that item a little bit, rather than kind of sort of buff the champions who are so far out of meta. I don't think any of these changes, I don't think any of the bug fixes did anything. Yeah, I mean, none of these did anything. I mean, there's this one, which I don't even know about. Poppy's W now stops Stride Breaker, I guess. Poppy's not particularly amazing, though. And then here is the Set and Braum skin, which, I'll be honest, not bad. Not bad. I never thought we'd see Braum in a Speedo, but, okay. So that's it for this patch. Once again, this is more of a long-form, unedited video. Patreon helps me make these work. I want to thank all my Patreon supporters. I'll name them by name here. Here, I can actually bring them up real quick. So, going in order. If your name isn't listed, you aren't here. But if your name is listed, you are here. Okay? So, going in order. At the highest tier, we have Armorian and Harmless Scarecrow. At the second highest tier, we have Amaru, Blazing Rock, Plead Master, Crash Pinho, Luke Robinson, Malice, Nitro Muffin, Naxura, Anaroy, Ray, Destroy. At the third highest tier, We have Atroxity, Ben, Charlotte, Creador, Daniel, Fiala, Daisy Mew, Ecliptor, Fulyuki, Gib the Square, Kelfos Zeramar, Naptroll, Louis Mbui, Marty Chica, Malrunner, PKZ, and Ryan Zhang. Thank you all for subscribing and supporting. That helps me make these videos a lot because, again, I don't really have to worry about each video getting the highest views if I have a steadier Patreon thing. So thank you all, and here were the 11.12 patch notes.